Every week, our senior pastor, Jeff Griffin, pulls together some amazing content for our weekend services. But that got us thinking, what would it look like to get some additional life out of our weekend messages? What would it look like to have some additional faith-based conversations associated with what we're already talking about during a weekend service? I'm excited to say that we are bringing back Midweek at the Compass as a true podcast format. We're going to have interviews with different staff and guests each and every week to have some additional life change stories, some additional conversations about what we are already learning here. So are you ready? Let's sit back and enjoy some time together here on Midweek at the Compass. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Midweek at the Compass. My name is Jake. I'm our online pastor here. Always great to be with you. You know, we're in the middle of our sermon series. It's called Side by Side. And what we're really striving to do is give you a look at group life and how life is better with friends and church life is better with friends. And to let you know that we would love to have you join us in a small group. You know, we've been looking at the sermons that we've been given throughout the course of this series and tried to pick up on some themes and aspects of them that have made sense to have further conversation on. But what we wanted to do this week was take even a step further back and look at our worship service overall. So we're going to let you behind the scenes a little bit of our planning processes, what goes on to make our weekend services happen, both in person and here on Compass Online, and really just let you know of the thought and the prayer and the planning and how it all comes together each and every week. Because the last time I checked, Sunday still comes every 7 days. So there's always a lot to do. And it keeps my guest here busy. So I want to take just a second to say, what's up, Ian Sheppard?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right. So Ian is our worship director, worship leader at our Bolingbrook campus. How long have you been doing that?
So it's been, I think, 3.5 years.
Okay. So I'm excited because I cut my teeth on worship growing up. It was the first place I served in my local church when I was a wee little lad and into high school. But I got to continue doing it here at Compass for a while, and it's been a blast. So I love the opportunities to get to talk about it. But before we do, we've got some important things to discuss.
Absolutely.
And when I say important, I mean it's not really important in the scheme of worship, but it's important because you and I both geek out about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yep.
All right. So we are going to talk really quickly about Spider-Man. So if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to just keep clicking that fast forward button a couple of times. We'll make it pretty quick, but just generally speaking, what were your thoughts?
Oh, man, that movie had a lot of feels to it. I think the movie to me was great, obviously awesome. I think the ending really bothered me personally.
Really?
It really did. Like, walking out of the theater, it just didn't feel great. Like, to know that Peter is not now known by, like, anybody that he knows and loves. He's not known as an Avenger. Things like that. That really bothered me a lot.
I thought the ending was just about perfect, which, anyways, fascinating to me.
Yeah.
My take on it is it took a lot of really bad Spider-Man movies to finally make a good Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
I am not one to fall asleep in movies, and it took me so long to stay awake through the original Spider-Man movies. It was bad news. And if you joined last week, you know that part of my goal here today is just to make Ian laugh. So
oh, wow.
I feel like it's already successful in and of that regard. So I loved it. I thought the ending was bittersweet but wonderful. The story that they were able to tell. I think there were some memes online that said that there were 14 million ways this movie could have gone, and only one of them where it went well. And this was that one.
Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that I didn't like the ending or I didn't like the movie. I think the movie overall was great. And it was honestly a really great, fresh take on, like, honestly, the plot centering around old movie, basically, Spider-Man villains. And I thought that was really well done. I think it was just very heartbreaking to me to see Peter not being able to enjoy his best friend or his love and Mary Jane at the end and losing, Aunt May. That was a lot to
It
process.
hit hard.
Yeah.
All right, so we're done with the spoiler end of things, but one last thing on Marvel. So I have some maybe unpopular opinions about which Marvel movies are my favorite.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, off the cuff here, if you were like trying to rank the top 3 to 5 of your favorite Marvel films, where do you think you go with that?
Oh, gosh. Oh, that's a really great question. So for me, I think number one for me, it's so hard. It's probably a tie between The Winter Soldier
Okay.
and Infinity War.
Okay.
And I probably would put Endgame at 3.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
So-
Because to me, Endgame was the perfect culmination
Mm-hmm.
of a decade worth of movies. My childhood.
Yes.
Endgame was the greatest day of my life.
It-
I'm totally kidding. I'm married with children. Those were all much better days. But it was a wonderful movie. But why would you put that behind those other two?
So I think Endgame is very, very good, and it is very exciting. So my fiance and I, Sydney, we actually watched through all of the MCU movies through like chronological order, and definitely getting to Endgame is very satisfying. But I tie Winter Soldier and Infinity War for first, in part because I've seen both of them in theater 6 times.
Oh.
Like separately.
Okay.
Because what I would do is I'd be like, if people like hadn't seen it, I'd be like, hey, do you want to go see it? Like, I'll come see it with you, kind of a thing. Because I'm an extrovert. That's just what I do.
It's an invitation culture right there.
Absolutely, it is. There you go.
Hey, I like it. So the Infinity Saga for me is number one. So Infinity War and Endgame, I can't separate them. To me, it's a 6-hour movie. But after that is where I start to digress from the masses. Doctor Strange is my second favorite because to me, that's a combination of Marvel meets Inception. And I loved Inception. I thought just visually and storytelling-wise, it was great. And then third, I loved Ant-Man. Like, unapologetically, I loved a comedy heist movie mixed into all these serious Marvel movies. It was my cup of tea. It was my flavor. I loved Ant-Man. And Paul Rudd. What's not to like about Paul Rudd? He's dreamy.
That's so dreamy, right?
All right, but let's even get beyond past that here. So, as best as I can to try and tie that into what we're talking about, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is super creative. Ian Sheppard, you are part of a super creative team here at the Compass Church, planning weekend services week in and week out. So I want to just talk about the process in general. Like, how do you start to craft a weekend service?
Yeah, so it kind of starts with our whole process. One of the values of our worship arts team or our department is that we plan series out. And so what's really neat about our meetings, we actually meet on Wednesdays. Jake actually attends a lot of our meetings, which is really awesome. It's great to see you on Wednesdays.
Good to be seen.
And so what's really awesome is Jeff also is a part of our Wednesday meetings because he speaks into a lot of things creatively. And he also shares a lot of sermon outlook things with us. So really a big piece of it is he will give us a week-to-week overview of a sermon series. For example, the series we're in right now, Side by Side. Jeff would start off from week 1 and he'd go through all the weeks. He'd share with us the scripture that he's teaching from. He would share with us maybe any main ideas that he's going to land on and any other tidbits that he wants to add. And then he'll give us a suggested worship theme, which really is for our opening worship set, and then a response song theme, which is required. So it's a suggested worship theme because Jeff wants to give us freedom to be able to create worship sets that are engaging for people in our congregation. But the response song, he wants that to kind of tie into his message, really coming out of his message theme.
Okay, so give me an example of what would be a worship theme that you might see for a top set. Anything that comes to mind of what you've kind of been able to plan around here over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, even for a series that we have coming up, one that Jeff talks about a little bit here and there in a lot of his series is songs about hardship, like how do we worship God in the midst of our hardship of our lives? Because let's face it, we go through a lot of difficult things. Like COVID is still a thing, and that's probably really stressful for a lot of people. And so just being able to encourage people through our worship sets and songs of, hey, we want to make this an opportunity for people to connect with God, whether you're in person or you're online.
All right, so when you're planning, you're starting with Jeff's message and building out. So when you're picking songs, you're not necessarily picking ones that you just love or what sounds great or is just kind of the current top 40 chart or anything along those lines. It's geared around thematic elements. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's different than I think what a lot of other churches are doing. So, so just generally, we talked about how you might kind of navigate through ideas get pitched, themes get pitched. What's the next step that you guys would take? Do you get together collaboratively to discuss songs? Do you just pick and choose? Does each worship leader pick and choose what they see fit?
Yeah, so what we've been doing for the past few years is we've been planning our sets together as worship leaders. So when I mention worship leaders, I mention people like Peter Farnham, who's our central music director, Rachel Farnham, who is his wife, who's the worship director for our South Naperville campus, Jana Dukes, who is our Wheaton worship director, and then Jane, who is our worship arts associate. She's really leading a lot at our Naperville campus, but also kind of at Wheaton and also at Bolingbrook and South Naperville. She kind of goes all over the place, which is really awesome.
It's good to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah, it's pretty great. You could say she's like a Renaissance woman kind of a thing. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Comes up from a conversation we had in our meeting last week, which was super fun.
Yeah, I said Ian was a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
And I buy it.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll kind of take all the weeks and then we'll just basically say an individual is planning, a week. We usually randomly choose just like, hey, Pete's going to plan week 1, Rach is going to plan week 2, Jana week 3, etc. And we kind of go through and just plan stuff on our own. And then we come together for like a worship leader meeting that we have Tuesday mornings to just talk about the set that we planned and our idea behind it. We share our heart behind it, and then we just talk through it together and, try to encourage each other and also offer some feedback and work through wrestling down whether we're cool with the set or whether we'd like to see something go a little differently, or maybe we want to offer like some, just constructive feedback, which everyone's super easy to work with and just fun to talk to. And so, we work really well together in that regard. And then when we come into our Wednesday meeting with Jeff, we pitch response songs to him. So we'll just share, if it was our week to plan, it's, Pete started that first week, he'll be like, hey, this is the song that we were thinking of and this kind of thing. And he'll explain kind of the idea behind it. Jeff will look at the lyrics, and then Jeff will make the call in regards of, does that fit his message? Is that where he's headed? Is it an okay fit, but looking for a better fit? Or is it, hey, I just don't think this is going to work, and then we just kind of go off of that.
Okay, so let's talk a specific here. We just finished week 3 of Side by Side, and the song that was sung in person and online was a song called God of Revival. It's by Bethel Music. It's one that should be at least relatively familiar if people have been at the Compass Church for really any length of time over the last year or so. But talk to me about that song. If you can even remember here, it might be a little on the spot, but what was it about God of Revival to where you thought it would be a good option to tie in to this weekend's message?
Yeah, so the passage that Jeff was actually teaching from has a moment where the people of God actually talk about the power of God. And one of the notes that Jeff makes in his sermon is how specifically when nations fight against the people of God in the Old Testament, and in this case in the New Testament in Acts 4, there's a scripture in Psalm 2 verses 1 and 2 that says, "Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed." And what that psalm eventually moves to, and a lot of other scriptures in the Old Testament, is showing the power of God and really just saying that even the rulers of the earth cannot thwart the plans of God or, hurt the people of God in that sense. And so that song really starts off by saying, we've seen what you can do, O God of wonders. Your power has no end. And it really is an opportunity for us as worshipers of God to say, Lord, we center our hope on your power, on your strength, and your love for us, in that regard. So.
Yeah, I got to imagine that it's really nice when the very first lyric of a line ties in that directly.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So let's broaden it back out one more time here. So we talked about the planning process. We talked a little bit about this specific song of response, but let's just talk worship in general for a couple of moments. Obviously, we would say here at the Compass Church that it's important to be worshiping God, and we would say that it's also be important to worship God through song for lots of different reasons. But I would like to just ask you kind of an open-ended question here of how have you seen worship shape your faith? And when I say worship, I know there's a lot of different things we could talk about as a definition of worship. It's very broad, but just specifically from the musical end of things, how have you seen your profession, your craft, your skill, your desire, how has that started to shape, broaden, refine, whatever it is, your faith in Jesus?
Yeah, I think, what's funny is there's a musical aspect to what I do, and we care a lot about excellence, and that's really important to us. And it's awesome to be able to play with the musicians that we get to play with, and I absolutely love doing like our online service recordings because it's a chance for me to work with people from our central department that I normally don't get to see. Like Wednesdays, I'm seeing everybody from our worship arts department, and then after Wednesday, I'm like at Bolingbrook. I'm kind of either in my office or in the worship closet, or I'm like practicing on stage. And so if anyone comes in from the worship arts department on a Sunday at Bolingbrook, immediately the first thing I'm thinking is, what the heck are you doing here, Because I'm like, I just didn't expect to see you today,
Yeah.
But it's also really awesome, like Garrett here, who's recording for us and everything, like I saw him a couple weeks ago, and it was just really awesome to see him. I was like, dude, this is awesome to see Garrett here. So in terms of that, though, I think one thing that God's really moved my heart on a lot is to have moments where I'm like, obviously I have to have sessions where I'm practicing through songs musically, but also I need moments and time to practice through songs where it's not so much about the musical side of it, but it's about worshiping the Lord. Because sometimes it's easy to miss those opportunities when you're leading. Like Sydney and I talk a lot about how I don't always get a chance to sit through a service and just be a part of the service. And sometimes when I go to visit like Naperville campus, I know a lot of people there, they'll ask me, like, hey, why aren't you on stage? And I'm the kind of person that's like, I don't have to be on stage all the time. Like, I'm okay sitting in the crowd, I have no problem with that. And I think that's an opportunity for God to draw me out a little bit and to say, hey, I've called you to lead, but also the way that worship has grown me a lot is just really balancing both, like the musical side and also growing deeper in my love for the Lord in the process.
I love that. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost like you practice and then you worship.
Yeah.
And then you put them together on a Sunday morning to where the practice that you've done and the worship that has just been your own personal time of studying the lyrics or just putting it on and meditating through lyrics of a song or praising God for who he is from any number of ends just kind of gets to meld together in a really wonderful way. And I promise I didn't pay you to say that you love the online recording or anything. So I love to hear that personally just because I live in the online recording space. But it's wonderful. You get to work with some amazing people. You always have. I'm a little bit jealous at times of that, if I'm being completely honest. But you guys do some really, really amazing things in terms of leading people through screens well, but just as importantly, leading people in your local church setting and congregation, not just to be able to sing songs, but to experience God's heart, the love that he has for them, and to just have a way to try and reflect that back, I think is just at the crux of what you get to do, at least on a Sunday morning. And I know that it's a lot of prep to get to just that time frame.
So much work. Like, it's great work. It's good work. But there's a lot that goes into it. And, I just love being able to work with everyone, like centrally, as well as people at the Bolingbrook campus. Just there's so many people, not just at Bolingbrook, but at all of our campuses that really do pour in their time and their energy. And we love the volunteers. We love some of the other musicians. We love everybody we work with because everyone gives of their time so selflessly. And it's all for the love of the Lord, and it's all for our church.
Awesome. So I want to leave it open-ended. Do you have any closing thought that you'd like to give overall? Or do you just want to say, it was great to be here?
That's a good question. I think for me, the biggest thing is just, don't be afraid to lean into the Lord challenging you to worship him deeper. Maybe you're not familiar or not comfortable with raising your hands or things like that or clapping, and that's okay. But when the Lord leads you into a moment, don't be afraid to explore that, and just know that, you don't have to worry about what other people are looking at you like, because the truth is it's kind of awkward for everybody. But it's an opportunity to just express your love to God, and ultimately, I think God really does some big things when we dig deeper into our love and relationship with him. So
that's fantastic. Ian, man, I just want to say thanks again for being here. Thanks for being my friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting to work with your friends is an honor. Getting to talk Marvel for a couple of minutes is an honor. Honestly, just hearing your heart for worship and your love for people and the Lord is the biggest honor out of all of that. So just want to say thanks for offering your time and perspective and giving people here a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look of how we ultimately land where we do for our worship services, from messages to music to, hosting end of things. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that's in play, and it's good for people to know how we land there. So there you go. Next week, coming up at Midweek at the Compass, we're going to have a conversation with Kim Huffman about seeing a need and meeting a need. Come back, join us next time where we have that conversation here at Midweek at the Compass.